All right. Thank you, Danny. This is Ricky. Good talking to you. Hey, so yeah, I got a couple of questions I think that are more sort of thematic questions and might answer a lot at the same time. So let's do that.
Okay.
First, like theme coming in is that came in actually through email. If you could speak a little bit about undocumented people, if the fact that they have to have an EIN or social security number, and how this bill would treat those people.
Yeah, you can be not a legal resident and have a social security number or a tax identification number, but you can't be undocumented. And there are two things. That, as the CCL policy wanted to get to as many people. If you were here in the country, we wanted you to get to the dividend. But in the negotiation process, that we couldn't pull it off. And then there's also the problem of how do you get this payment to people you can't find? And the tragedy of undocumented migrants is that they are trying not to be found, and they're trying to sneak by. And so, really what we need to do to truly address that is we do need immigration reform, but that's immigration and climate change are two problems that one organization we don't believe can or should try to solve. So this is not just for citizens, this is for residents, but you do have to be documented. We have to be able to find you.
Great, thanks, Danny. The next question coming in, a couple of questions from Jim Probst, Lisa De Bueno, looking for some clarification about the exporting of fuels, and particularly Jim asked about exporting coal from the U.S. to a country without a carbon fee, and Lisa asking about, is there a rebate for these types of situations?
Yes, if coal leaves the United States, it would receive a rebate on the fee placed on that coal. And if that country has no carbon price, then they get the coal without the carbon fee placed on it. If the country does have a carbon price, then we would rebate as much as the equivalence. And so we would keep some of that money, and that was in there to incentivize them to come to the bargaining table, because they could, or to introduce a comparable carbon price, because they could keep that money if they were to have their own carbon price, but instead we're keeping it. So that is the construction of the bill.
Okay, and there's a couple of questions. I just want some clarification, because our old policy was based on reducing emissions from 1990 levels, and now it's 2015. So if you could just talk about that a little bit, and then the difference between, I guess some people were still thinking about 33% within 10 years, but now it's like 40, and maybe there's a little bit of confusion there.
Yeah, 1990 and 2015 are about the same, so that's easy. And what the bill says, the 33% reduction in 10 years is from REMI. And with the emissions reductions curves, by statute, this bill requires a 40%, at least 40% reduction. The language does need to be cleaned up. This has been my biggest headache since this is introduced, is that language is actually unclear. So we need to fix the rate of increase, the inflation adjustment, and we need to fix the language around the environmental integrity mechanism, and when it's 5% below and when it's 2.5%. So it's at least a 40% reduction, and so that would take place at 12 years, but that's by statute. If we don't do that, then the regs come back, and that's in 2030. So that's what it is. There is a need to clean up the language there, but 33% after 10 years, that comes from REMI. If it was just by statute, it would be 30%.
Great. Do you have time for more questions, Brett?
Yes, we do. We have time up until the 35-minute mark, actually.
Okay, great. So other questions, Danny. Peter Joseph wants to know, the measurement of the greenhouse gas equivalent reductions or the emissions. Does that involve like this massive bureaucratic record-keeping process?
It involves the same process as today. So it specifies that it's the same process as used to create the current U.S. inventory of greenhouse gases. So currently, emitters are already reporting their emissions to the EPA, and they're putting out a report. So it would use that, and it is specific that it is to continue using that methodology.
Okay. A couple questions that came in from email before tonight. What's the motivation of provisions that treat U.S. territories differently than U.S. states? If you could speak to that just for a few moments.
There's a couple of provisions. So I think that the way this is constructed is that while the territories are it's difficult. So some of this is covered in the dividend delivery study. And so when you look at the dividend delivery study, you realize that they have their own tax systems, they have a lot of their own systems, and there are just difficulties in making those mesh. There's also the problem that, a lot of them are islands. And so you need to get this to an island. There are greater shipping costs. So just in general, it was thought that it would be streamlined if they were not, if basically we border adjusted those territories. So they don't pay the fee and they don't get the dividend. So there's a whole host of problems there, but that was the conclusion that came about in the discussion prior to this bill being introduced.
Great. Should we, as volunteers, should they be going out right now and trying to get more co-sponsors on this particular bill?
Yeah, why not?
There you go. Can you also speak to, people want to know, were we a part of the negotiation, or were you a part of the negotiation?
Yes.
Great. There's some concern, or some people are talking about, people who are already coming out and attacking this, the naysayers, the people who are saying like this is a terrible deal and it's a giveaway to industry. Can you speak a little bit more about that, and maybe just how we should approach that when we hear it out ourselves?
Yeah. Basically, this cuts out the Clean Power Plan. That's what it boils down to. And so President Obama, Lisa Jackson, and the Clean Power Plan itself say that this is better. So if you really trust the Clean Power Plan, you should trust the Clean Power Plan, and you should trust that this is better. Everything else is there. I mean, everything else is there. You can continue to regulate. I think a lot of this comes from misconception. You can continue to regulate all the other toxics, everything else. You can continue to regulate it. It's just you can't regulate and put a fee on the same thing. And the Clean Power Plan itself says this is better than the Clean Power Plan. I think we just need to keep on repeating that. I think that this has been something that has been a goal of the environmental community for so long, but this beats the pants off the Clean Power Plan. This beats the pants off of our Paris commitments. This is the strongest carbon price that has ever been introduced in Congress, and it is the strongest carbon price that has ever been introduced in a bipartisan fashion, period.
Amen to that, Danny. Two quick things that I think we'll cut to the next section here, and make time for questions between each of these next two as well. So keep the great questions coming, and we'll put the link to the forums if you don't get your answer spoken to here. But one that's been a recurring theme in the emails ahead of time as well as in tonight's chat is just clarifying to make sure the understanding behind, if another country doesn't have a carbon price and we rebate fuel that is fossil fuels, is there any kind of a perverse incentive for them to continue to offshore that coal, for example, to another country and avoid the fee and be able to kind of continue to produce at the current levels? Can you speak to the economics of international trade a little bit on that?
I can try, but I mean, look at the biggest economies in the world are already doing this, and their ambition has been limited by our lack of ambition. And so once we show some ambition on this, I think that they're going to want to match our price. The biggest producers, the biggest users of fossil fuels are already pricing them. And so I think that I don't see that being a big problem. And the other thing, remember, 90% of the United States economy is us selling to ourselves. Only 10% of our GDP is from exporting abroad. So I am not concerned about that kind of leakage.
Excellent. How about a CBO timeline? Is there already plans afoot on that front?
For getting a CBO score, no. I mean, it's been something that we want to do, but the bear has been getting this bill out.
Danny, from what you've seen with the larger big green groups from EDF or Sierra Club, what has the overall initial reaction been?
Supportive. I think it tracks very closely to the responses from the Market Choice Act. Most big green groups have been supportive. EDF and NRDC haven't said anything. Excuse me, not EDF. Sierra Club, EDF has released a positive statement. Sierra Club and NRDC have not said anything, and I don't expect them to.
And then on the flip side, how do you anticipate the resistance strategy forming from the fossil fuel industry, Fox News, Heartland, any of the groups that really in the past have lined up opposition for carbon taxes?
At this point, it's shaping out like Americans for Tax Reform. Grover Norquist's outfit is going to be the primary. They've already mobilized against this. More attacks are coming. And so I think that probably the first line of attack that we can expect is what is in the Scalise resolution. I think we can see more of that. And I think that's a safe bet. I do expect them to also be more creative. But I think that that's going to be the bulk of their attack.
There's been a couple of questions wanting to clarify the coverage not only with CO2 but with methane. Can you speak quickly again to the methane coverage, or if there's a specific fee on that type of gas as well?
Yeah, methane that is going to be can be robustly and agreed upon in where you can count it in a robust and widely agreed upon way, it should be priced, and it should be priced at its global warming potential. But where it is leaking, it would have already been priced priced as if it was going to be CO2, but where at least you can still regulate it for that, because there's no robust and widely agreed upon way to measure that. So regulation is going to be the first way of getting at methane that leaks.
Excellent. And could you speak just a little bit of the administrative impact on assessing at the border as far as what level of bureaucracy is needed, as well as assessing at the actual agricultural fee exemption? I think there's concerns in the chat about bureaucratic levels of additional details needed to be collected.
For the agricultural exemption, we don't anticipate that being too complicated because there's an existing program. So in the discussions, the inspiration was the dyed diesel program. This is a program that diesel used on farms is actually literally dyed red. So the idea is that if you have a truck and it's on a federal highway where you can't use it, the guy can go in there, pull out some of the fuel and see it. If it's red, you get a fine. But it doesn't have to be that. There's other fuels, farmers use them on their farms and their tractors, and they get a rebate for that. So this is a program that farmers are already used to. And so it could be something very, very similar for the rebate for farmers. In terms of the border adjustment, yeah, that could be a bear. And so, I mean, I've said consistently that that's the biggest concern, the biggest question mark with implementing this is how to do that at the border, how bad it will be. And so again, the best border adjustment is a border adjustment we don't have to use. And so that's why this was constructed in such a way to make it clear the best case solution is where we arrive at mutual agreements through bilateral or multilateral treaties.
Danny, you're doing such a great job fielding questions from every single direction here. We just have two more, and then we'll go to the final part of tonight's webinar. And one of them is this emerging theme of just really, how do you best advise responding to or not responding to a lot of the criticism from groups like Climate Hawks Vote or Food and Water Watch, people that might be critical of some of the trade-offs or feel like this bill is not an effective climate policy?
I saw there was some discussion about a big dog, something that I had said on Tuesday, and Madeline is right. Big dogs are kind, and they know they almost never have to be the big dog to use their strength or to swipe. And so I think that what we take a magnanimous approach here, and we say we welcome discussion on this, and they have a particular perspective. We have our perspective because we trust experts. We trust climate experts on the climate. We trust economists on this being the most efficient way to reduce carbon emissions. We trust the experts who wrote the Clean Power Plan saying that this is better than the Clean Power Plan. So, and that's where we're at. So I think that what you do is you stay positive, you stay on our message, you stay as to what we are for. We are people who trust experts, and you kind of leave in the silence what they're saying. So that's the way that I suggest approaching it, and we have the high ground.
Excellent. And then the last question, and then we'll go to our messaging recommendations for communication. Danny, what is the update right now with the goal of maintaining equality of numbers on both parties as the bill sponsors are rolled out?
It's largely out of our hands. It's a public bill. And so I think that there's some agreements that can be made, and